Hello, everyone. I'm Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire podcast. Please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, like the interview, and share it with your friends. My guest today is no other than Miss Lynne McTaggart. Lynne, thank you very much for taking the time and joining me today.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
You are a renowned author. You've turned towards science, and you've done so many interviews on various subjects that it was a little bit of a challenge for me to come up with a fresh direction for this discussion. Nevertheless, I hope you'll find it interesting.
Great. I'm sure I will.
So we know that any type of experiment, especially related to energy, can be influenced by the intention of the individual or the team doing the experiment. So when you went through your own experiments with an intention experiment, Project of 8, have you done any beforehand cleansing to eliminate unwanted energies?
Well, I'm not the experimenter. Thousands of people out there who are my readers and followers are the experimenters. They're the ones holding intention and focusing on a target. And there are, tens of thousands of them at any one time. So it's pretty impossible for us to tell them to clear certain energy. And the point is, of course, our beliefs have an effect. I mean, there's many studies that, for instance, scientists doing that study in consciousness research would get one outcome and somebody else who is a skeptic would have another outcome. So there is such a thing as an experimenter effect, and we know that. But I'm using different experimenters all the time, and it's all working. Most of them have worked. Of 41 intention experiments, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. And we have blinded many of the studies. So we don't have the last word on the power of intention, but they certainly are pretty interesting.
Yes, and the reason I asked the question is because I know from Dr. Masaru Emoto, who worked extensively with water. He was trying to shield the samples of water from him and his team by encapsulating them in specific recipients that won't transmit the feelings or the intention to the water before it will be exposed to various music or other type of feelings. But in your case, yes, the number is huge.
Yeah, and also Dr. Emoto, when he's talking about that, he's talking about something that is in his location. In my experiments, invariably the target is out in the field. Let's say it's a war-torn area, or it's an area of high violence, or it's seeds in a laboratory in Arizona, and I'm here in the UK, and my readers are all around the world from 80 countries in a particular experiment. And we always have people from around the world taking part. So they're never in the vicinity of the experiment. Whereas, as I say, what we're talking about, Dr. Emoto and I knew him. He was lovely. We did an experiment together. But in his circumstances, a lot of the time, he has the experimenters right there, touching the water, being near the water. And we know from evidence from numerous physicists, particularly the work of Emilio Preparata and Dr. Del Giudice of the University of Milan, two physicists that discovered that water has coherent domains, meaning it's like a tape recorder. Its molecules essentially coalesce around a charged particle in there. So a thought, an intention, and anything like that, music or whatever, can be embedded in water. So I can see why they would want to shield it.
Yes, and I use the research of Dr. Emoto and Dr. Pollack from Washington to write my books, which are fiction books, but I use their research to in my own plot. So that's why I know a little bit more about them. And also people, when they participate in various ceremonies, even healing groups, they do sage cleaning or to pure themselves and let out any energy that shouldn't be part of that specific ceremony.
I know some people do. I mean, I haven't found it necessary in the work that I've done with group intention. I think the key element of group intention is achieving an altered state of oneness and feeling a profound sense of oneness, whether it's in the big group intention experiments or it's in Power of Eight groups. And I think that is really what's responsible for the extraordinary outcomes we've had and the extraordinary healings we've witnessed with Power of Eight groups.
Yes, and in preparation for this interview, I went through the books again, all three of them. And an idea came to my...
There are four.
Four. So I went to the Bond, the Field, and the Power of Eight only. So an idea came to me that it was determined that the ley lines are becoming wider and stronger these days. So have you tried to determine while doing a test if the samples and the participants set on ley lines that might impact the outcome?
I think that would be impossible to discern because we have people from 80, 90 countries participating at any one time. We did an intention experiment for Israel and Gaza not long ago, and we had 30,000 people. So there is no way to actually measure the ley lines of those individuals. Furthermore, we're getting consistent results from different people participating at different times. So every single experiment has a new, batch of people. Some people may have participated before, but the vast majority did not. So I think that we have to look at the consistency of that and not necessarily look at a variety of other things. I think what happens with group intention, Power of Eight groups, and intention experiment groups is that people create a sense of oneness. And that experience of intending together all the same thought at exactly the same time creates a transcendent effect. We've measured brainwaves during, and you've probably read about that in the Power of Eight. We measured brainwaves of novice intenders who were part of Power of Eight groups for the first time and discovered that their brainwave signatures, which we thought were going to be just like meditation, were nothing like meditation. They were almost identical to the brainwave signatures of Sufi masters during chanting or Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer, as measured by Dr. Andrew Newberg, the neuroscientist, then at the University of Pennsylvania. So what we've seen is changes in brainwaves, incredible changes, amazing changes that are turning off parts of the brain that make us feel separate. So the parietal lobes, the temporal lobes, the right frontal lobe, the part of the brain involved in worry, doubt, negativity, these are all dialed way down. So the people are essentially in a state of ecstatic oneness. And it's my belief that that's where the miraculous changes occur.
Yes, I mean, it is fabulous of what you discovered around along with the groups and the tests and the experiments, that people can take these concepts and the concepts and apply them locally to their own community. And to be honest with you, I am doing the same thing with my own group of friends for one of us who is in need. She's going through a rough time, and we gather every night around her in a visual circle, and we send her love and energy, and we are monitoring the effects for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that's very powerful for every community to apply this type of concept.
Absolutely. In fact, I have some free tools on my website in a section called The 8 Revolution, because I started thinking about it and started thinking, boy, the world is a mess right now. We need an army of change makers. And then I thought to myself, well, we actually have an army of change makers. There are tens of thousands of Power of 8 groups around the world. What if I had them band together and start using tools in their communities and using intention to heal their communities? So I'm providing free tools in this area on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, for people who are interested in doing that.
Thank you. And this leads me to the next questions. It's very organic. You just mentioned that the world is in a bad shape, and you also have access to an army of people who can turn this around. So my question is, do you think we crossed the line where no matter what percentage of us, let's say up to 10%, will pray and send love to war-torn zone? Will this still make a change?
Well, we've seen it make a change in my intention experiments. We've done about 11, 12 peace intention experiments thus far, and we've had remarkable response. With Sri Lanka back in 2008, the first one we did, that was a 25-year war. And I had people do intention for 10 minutes a day over 8 days. And no side of the Sri Lankan war was winning, the government nor the rebels. So I got hold of Dr. Jessica Utz, who is a noted scientist. She's a professor of statistics, and she's done a lot of evaluation of outcomes of consciousness research. So I thought she would be the perfect person. I asked her after our intention to do an analysis. Well, first of all, we got hold of data from 3 years before, or 2 years before, weekly injuries and deaths on all sides in the war. And we had a very good and quite accurate source who were keeping track. That's very hard to get in a war. And we discovered afterward that violence had quadrupled during our 8 days. And we were very worried about this, thinking, oh my goodness, did we do this? But then we discovered that the government, and the reason for that was the government had won a number of decisive battles that turned around the entire course of the war. And within a few months, the rebels, who had taken over the whole of the North and choked it off, had been defeated. And then a few months later, that 25-year war was over. Now, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? But when you keep doing things like this and it keeps having these remarkable outcomes, it starts becoming compelling. And we saw that particularly with St. Louis. We did an intention experiment for an area of St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, which is officially America's most violent city. And the neighborhood we chose was officially the most violent place in America. So we did an intention for that neighborhood called Fairground. And we got hold of some very good police data from 3 years before our experiment to 6 months afterward. And once again, we asked Jessica Utz to do the analysis. And she discovered that all the neighborhoods around Fairground, plus St. Louis as a whole, had violent crime and property crime continuing to go up as they had before. Fairground property crime continued to go up, but violent crime, the focus of our intention, plummeted by 43%. And that was in comparison to all of the neighborhoods around there. So when you start seeing this, you start thinking, wow, this is starting to get interesting. So I think when you say 10%, I'm not sure there is a percentage. I'm very well aware of the Transcendental Meditation group and the idea of the square root of 1% of the population meditating. And they have some very good data about critical masses of meditators making the crime rate go down. But remember, meditation is a passive exercise. We are actually doing a focused intention. We're actually doing one giant thought all together. Call it secular prayer, if you will, but we're focusing on a particular outcome. And what I've seen is large effects with a group of 8 people, even less. Huge effects with groups of 30,000 people, but it's not it's not an arithmetic progression. We see huge effects with small groups. We see huge effects with big groups. We see huge effects no matter what the distance. So or whether you're sitting in the same room, there's some sort of psychic internet that gets created with Power of 8 groups. And it's that I think has huge effect, not only on the targets, but right now, my greater interest is on what happens to the people themselves.
Yes, and it's interesting. And if we have to step back and think of local conflicts or wars in general, people in these countries don't want wars. They love their neighbors, but it's something else which causes the conflict. And if we have to think in percentages, maybe the same 80-20 rules applies here as well. Like 20% of the population, or even a smaller percentage, creates 80% of the conflict in the world. So the more we shrink that top 20, the more peace we're going to have all around the world.
Yes, I mean, I think it's time for, in pretty much so many countries, I can think of a few exceptions, but not many. I think we need to get rid of our leaders. And we have to come up with a completely different way of creating our world, basically, a new economics, a new way of doing things, not like that are beyond communism or capitalism or anything like that. As you say, most people want a peaceful life. They want a safe place to live, a good school for their children, meaningful work. Most people want all of the same things, but we get greatly polarized by the political landscape, and it's getting worse and worse.
I agree. And I studied common law a little bit in the last 3-4 years. And it's such a rabbit hole type of adventure that you won't believe what's in there. And in fact, you call a country just a piece of land, but there is no country. It's a corporation, which usually is a foreign corporation, and they run us as being its employees. So it's so deep, the corruption goes so deep that is frightening, and people don't want to listen or even learn about what's being done to them.
I think people woke up a bit more after COVID. Yes. I think in observing what's gone on and the authoritarian rules that came about with COVID, a lot of people started questioning and saying, wait a minute, are they telling us the truth? And I think people are starting to wake up about the levels of corruption, but it's difficult to know what to do because we're given very limited choices. So my own feeling is, don't look at the top, look at the bottom, look at ground up and from the ground up and local change. So you just need your neighborhood, your community, and start working with that. That's why we created the 8 Revolution, because every good social movement started with a small group. If you look at Martin Luther King, he had a handful of people who were marching. It wasn't a big march. It wasn't a big deal, but he was very smart about his PR and made sure at one of them when there was a bit of a standoff between his freedom marchers and the very redneck police of this one area of the South, he made sure there was a photographer nearby when one of the policemen who had, a savage-looking dog with him, took a lunge at a very nice-looking and Pacific-looking young Black teenager. And that picture changed everything. That went around the world. It was on the front page of every newspaper in America, and it launched the civil rights movement. By the same token, Gandhi, liberated in India from the British by giving local communities a little spinning wheel, creating local industry so that India was no longer dependent upon Britain for its textiles and suddenly had its own industry. And that's what he realized is starting small creates a big revolution. And so I don't worry about the people on top. I am concerned about the people on the bottom.
Yes, and these were leaders which were self-aware of their action, and they were aware that at any time they have to sacrifice themselves for the cause. Nowadays, I don't know of any such leader which is willing to sacrifice himself. And at the same time, media is pretty much one-sided. Now it's turning slowly. So we have to depend on independent media and people on the street to come and film and take pictures and, spread it out there for the whole world to see it.
Yeah, but this is a unique time where most people are not getting their news from the conventional media anymore. People are getting their news from things like this or social media or one of umpteen kinds of independent sources, some good, some bad. So people are looking out for different ways of getting news. And this is a time more than any other that I can think of where anybody can start up something that starts providing information or starts a movement. We are creating all kinds of independent ways of communicating now.
Yes, even a podcast like mine from time to time squeeze in certain information that can trigger an awakening into one of the viewers, and that's amazing because there are thousands of podcasts like mine, and they don't have to watch only my podcast, but they can watch somewhere else, and they can still get a different perspective.
Now, one thing that we haven't talked about, though, that I think is one of the most powerful things in making change is, as I mentioned, what happens to the participants of an intention experiment. Now, I started surveying people back in 2008 after the first peace intention experiment, the one for Sri Lanka. And it was just to find out whether or not they'd been able to get on, whether or not they had any difficulties with their computers, what the experience was like for them. And I was astonished to see people saying things like this. I felt like I was part of a higher network. I had goosebumps up and down my arms. I was crying uncontrollably. I felt like I was in a tractor beam in Star Trek. People were feeling unbelievable energy and heat. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. These are people who participated around the world in front of their computer screens. So they were sitting by themselves, as I am now, and you are. And yet we're having this connection. But more than that, they started saying things like this. I made up with my estranged partner. My grown child who hasn't called me for 4 years suddenly picked up the phone. I'm getting along better with my boss, my not very nice boss, or my coworkers. And 50% said, I feel more love for everyone I come in contact with. People were hugging strangers. So this blew my mind. And when I started calculating it, about 40% of people said they were getting along with the people around them. 50% more in love with everyone they come in contact with. Another amazing statistic was that about a third of those participating said that they were, some condition of theirs, some health condition, was better or completely cured. So I'm blown away by this whole thing. And they said all kinds of other things. Many decided to leave their jobs and take a job in something like the Peace Corps. You know, people wanted something more meaningful to do. It had touched their hearts that deeply. So I started realizing that the more important reaction is what happens to the participants. Because if we start calculating how many people they affect, think of this. Let's take the 30,000 people who participated in the Israeli Gaza event. Half of them said they were more in love with everyone they come in contact with. So they're going to have that peaceful, loving state that they connect with when they're connected with their whole social network. The latest suggestions from Columbia University is that each of us has about 600 contacts, 600 people we connect with. So imagine these people, 15,000, connect with 600 each. And also imagine, think of Harvard University and Nicholas Christakis, his work in social networks. He's found social networks are highly contagious. If we're happy, we're more likely to have happy friends, not because we self-select happy people to be with, but because of the natural spread of happiness. Same with loneliness, even obesity, but also kindness and altruistic acts. If you're kind to someone else, you do something selfless and altruistic to someone else, they are more likely to have this spread down a social network by 3 degrees. So if John is kind and selfless and does something nice to Jane, she's more likely to do the same to Peter, who's more likely to do the same to Paul, who's more likely to do the same to Sam. And so it goes down a social network, constantly spreading out there. I started doing a calculation of what this would look like. And if you look at all of that social networking going down in this extraordinary ripple effect, you come up with about 500 million people who are affected by that single intention experiment, suddenly change their lives, suddenly more in love with everyone they come in contact with. To me, that is possibly the quickest and most effective way to change things.
Yes, it's unbelievable. And staying on the subject of networking and relationship, in the bond, you talk about the superorganism we create in our relationships. So do you think that this bond has weakened or strengthened since you published your book? And why I'm asking is because migration has changed the fabric of the world. Now, when people migrate from their place, they weaken that community bond, and they go to a place where there is no community, so they have to build something up from scratch. So how do you see this migration?
Okay, well, first of all, that's a complex issue, and we tease it apart, and I'm not a politician, but let me just talk about the bond. By bond, I mean a connection so integral and profound that it's impossible to say where one thing ends and another thing begins. And that is true for our subatomic particles, it's true for our bodies and how it operates from outside in, from the environment and its effect on the body as a symbiotic relationship. It operates with our community. And it also operates with ourselves and everything else in the planet, including outside the planet. You know, we are an intergalactic superorganism, as I like to put it. So that doesn't change. What changes is a fraying of the social network when people migrate. Now we are seeing this, we've seen this for years now. We're not tribal, and we haven't been for many hundreds of years. So there's an enormous amount of migration that has happened all the time in the first world. But now in the third world, the same thing is going on. I think what needs to happen is many things that are mostly political in terms of migration. And that's not really an area of my expertise, but my own feeling is that it should be an international consortium that work out the best and the most humanitarian way to distribute people who are trying to leave oppressive countries or places where they're going to die or die of famine, or maybe get killed in war, and how to help them. And that needs to be a worldwide effort. And anything less is a huge issue for particular countries who can't support the level of people coming in. And it's also not fair for the migrants themselves. So I think this has to be tackled as an international issue, and an understanding that there are a lot of people who want to get out of where they are and seek a better life.
Yes, you are right, because they think they're going to go to the promised land and they are not going to find what they were promised. And they're going to continue to suffer in a different environment. And I can tell you from living in Canada, there are a lot of people are trying to go back to their country of origin because the society has changed. The political environment is not what it used to be. And making a living is becoming harder and harder. And we consider Canada like a top level country. And this is how it was considered until, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, but not anymore. And this is going on in Europe and also in the USA. So the balance is changing, and not always for the good.
No, it's a complex area, but instead of countries just closing their doors or just opening their doors, they also have to understand that unbridled migration puts enormous pressure on often overstretched health resources, as it certainly is now in the UK. The UK's health system is completely broken, and living quarters are scarce now, and scarcer. So instead of being able to welcome migrants, a lot of people in Britain are really resentful of them, and that's going to cause a whole other problem. So this has to be something looked at by governments and by an international consortium to say, we need to solve this and we need to do it humanely.
Yes, indeed. Lynne, after witnessing so many healings and unexplained life changes, as you just mentioned, have your faith or perception of spirituality changed?
I've always been somebody who is a spiritual person, not in a conventional way in terms of a established religion. I mean, I was brought up Roman Catholic. So I grew up with a certain amount of spirituality, but I went my own way. I didn't agree with the idea that only Catholics go to heaven. That was the game changer for me. I thought, well, everybody should have a shot there. But I always had a sense of there being something greater. I think writing The Field, my first book in this area, changed the messenger. And it made me much more understanding of a very different science, a very different view of the world, a very spiritual view that talks really about extraordinary intelligent design. And that hasn't gone away. But what really clinched it for me was watching instant healings. With the power of 8, I just put people into groups one time back in 2008 in a workshop, saying, well, I don't know, I'll put them in groups and, it'll probably feel very nice, like a back rub. And that isn't what happened at all. People started healing before my eyes. I mean, we had a woman who had been limping in all weekend. The next day, after the Power of Eight group did an intention for her, this was small groups of 8 that I'd put people into, had them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. She shows up the next day walking normally. Then we had a woman with irritable bowel syndrome who said, my gut is cleared. Somebody else with depression saying, it feels like it's lifted. And somebody else with cataracts saying, I think they're about 80% better.
Yes,
and on and on and on. I've seen these kinds of extraordinary healings, again and again and again, even, I've seen 3 people get out of their wheelchairs. I've seen numerous cases of stage 4 cancer get reversed in a matter of months. I've seen all sorts of problems in people's lives get healed by the power of groups. What I've seen, I see many times when I do this with an audience, I'll put people into groups and we'll see many people in the audience, say, well, this or X healed. I had an audience in January in a big conference, and there was a guy who had was paralyzed on one side because he had a problem. He had a genetic problem with his spine, and his right leg was very weak and his right shoulder. And after one 10-minute intention, he said, I'm regaining this strength in my leg. It was amazing. And, I see this over and over again. That has really changed the messenger. Understanding the human capacity to heal in a group. And that is the thing I'm interested in, is the power of small groups. When people get together, extraordinary healings happen. Healings, as I said, with intention experiments. And that's not people in the same physical space. These are people scattered around the globe. I see it in my courses. When I run a masterclass, in a Power of 8 Intention masterclass, one a year, I put people into groups. I instruct them over 6 successive Saturdays for 2 hours. And then I have them meet every week for the rest of the year in their groups. And I coach them periodically through the year. And I find that the people who continue to meet in groups week after week after week record extraordinary things happening to them. Synchronicities, better jobs, financial windfalls, new relationships or improved relationships, and of course, physical healings. So I've seen thousands of these now. So that certainly has changed my spiritual perspective.
Very nice. And in fact, in January, I did attend a energy healing workshop in London, UK, just for the weekend, and only 55 people. And I did witness healing as well. Someone came in a wheelchair, couldn't move her hands. And by the end of the first day, she was able to lift her right hand. Another woman at the end of it was mainly based on breath work. So at the end of the second day, she said, I know I am healed. I'm going to go for another checkup, but I know I am healed. So these are testimonials that tells you that our body can heal if the circumstances are right and the energy is where it should be.
Yeah, I mean, we are brought up with a very materialistic view of the body and its capabilities. And even though we're little children know about their extrasensory perception and their abilities, but it gets flattened and denied by various authority figures, whether it's their parents or teachers or whatever. And they stop believing. But, it's like remote viewing. Everybody can do it. Everybody can see beyond their senses. You just have to practice. It's a bit like, banging a drum. You just have to practice and you'll be good. And the same with intention. We all have that power in self-healing. But I see that it's magnified in a group.
Yes. Have you read the Course in Miracles? And if yes,
Oh,
had
I've
any
dipped in
influence
and
on
out of
you?
it. I've dipped in and out of it, and Marianne Williamson is a good friend of mine.
Okay. Because I know everyone at one point in their life tried to read it, go through the year of lessons and mind changing, and some were more successful than others. And I was curious to see if you went through it as well.
No, I have not. I developed the 13 keys to intention mastery, which is what I teach in my master class and elsewhere. I developed them from a mix of looking at what master healers do. And Qigong masters, master healers, Buddhist monks have different techniques, but certain commonalities. So I took the commonalities and then also added to them what was working in the laboratory, what techniques were working in the laboratory or factors were making for successful intention in the lab. And that became the 13 keys. So there's simple. A lot of people think you need to do all kinds of things to become a master intender. And I've found the reverse is true. When I have very experienced people who've taken from a lot of different teachers, that's more of a problem because they have a desire. They cannot believe that it's relatively simple. It just takes practice and commitment, but they think you need to do lots of stuff. You need hours of priming, or you need years and years of practice to become a master of this. And I find that the simple practices that I do, and just a few moments, maybe a minute or two of just being together and getting into a little sync, is all that's needed. But it's about a real focused thought, learning how to focus, learning how to really hold a focused thought together. And as I say, commitment to show up.
Yes. And, I agree that the fact that sometimes we try too hard. And I personally was told, step back, relax, and go with the flow, and things will manifest. But sometimes it's that desire in us that we really want to perform and see things happening, and it's hard to step back.
Well, I think there's a mixture here. I think you have to let the universe know what you want. I mean, a lot of people say to me, I've got cancer, but I can't mention cancer in an intention because it'll make more cancer. And I say, no, it won't, because the way you will phrase it is my intention, or our intention for her, is that Jane Doe be immediately and completely free of, and permanently free of, all cancer in her left breast, and et cetera, et cetera. So you're phrasing it positively. She'll be healed of, she'll be free of, but you have to tell the universe what you want. And we've even tested that with intention experiments. When we haven't been specific, the intention hasn't worked. When we have, like with water, when we sent love to the water once, nothing happened. When we said we'd like this water to become more alkaline by at least 1 pH, it did. So we have found that telling the universe exactly what you want usually helps.
Yes.
What doesn't help is being obsessive about the outcome, constantly doing it, constantly worrying about it. That's one good thing about a Power of 8 group. 7/8 of the time you have to intend for somebody else. And that also works in helping you.
Yes, indeed. Lynne, you studied the field. We talk about intangible, tangible, about being determined. So do you think that at one point, if we make the intention, can we melt our physical body into the field?
Why would you want to do that? We don't have to melt it into the field. We are the field. I mean, a lot of people ask me, how do I enter the field? You don't have to. You're already there. Your subatomic particles are doing a little subatomic game of tennis with all of these subatomic particles out there in the field. What people don't understand is the field is made up of subatomic particles, which are vibrating packets of energy. And they trade energy with other subatomic particles, like this subatomic game of tennis. Now, just two subatomic particles trading energy isn't much energy. But when you look at all of the subatomic particles doing this little tennis game, what happens is the creation of a virtual particle each time. And when you calculate all of those little tennis games, you come up with this extraordinary, unfathomable amount of energy. Even though that virtual particle is only there for less than a blink of an eye, it creates this massive energy. So if you were sitting a meter away from me, a yard away from me for people in America, the energy between us would be enough to boil all the oceans of the world. That's how powerful it is. With everybody watching Oppenheimer recently, there's more energy density in empty space than there is in the nucleus of an atom, which is, responsible for the atomic bomb. So we have this extraordinary energy. We're part of it, but we don't feel like we're part of some oneness. We all hear we're all one, but we don't experience life like that. We experience life in competitive individuality, except for when we do group intention. And that's what I'm talking about in experiencing a state of ecstatic oneness. People actually feel what it's like, what our true reality is. Our true reality is this extraordinary state of ecstatic oneness, but we don't do that in ordinary life. And it has a lot to do with our cultural upbringing. And it has a lot to do with, just the way we live our lives now.
Yes, and if we consider the fact that everything happens at the same time, all we have to do is to find the right niche in the slice of time and move there and select the right or what we need at that particular time and fix it in the quantum field. This is what people are talking about, the physicists are talking about, that we can go into the right slice of time and select what we need, and everything will change to the positive.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I think every quantum physicist, many of them now anyway, people like the Italian physicist Carlo Rovelli says there's no such thing as time. We have created sequential time, the whole concept of time as a forward-going arrow. Time is much more like one big smeared out now. And so much of the physics supports that. So what we have to get to, I think, is the idea that there is no past, there is no future. We have created that, but there's certain evidence, there's certainly a lot of studies that I've written about in the one book you didn't read, The Intention Experiment. And I've written about going back to the past and being able to retroactively affect things, but the same thing in the future too, which is that I'm working on now. A lot of my work is about looking at being able to map your future, but also manifest it through seeing it and changing the trajectory. Now, that doesn't mean future is part of a predetermined situation. But if we think about quantum physics, everything is in a state of potential. We've already determined through much of the quantum evidence that we are co-creating, that we're collapsing those waves and creating reality as we experience it. So there's no reason that we can't look at that future potential, almost a bit like Scrooge on, when he's traveling with the ghost of Christmas yet to come. He's seeing what will happen if he doesn't change what he's doing. And in a way, we can do the same.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And there is a lot of talk about AI and transhumanism, and I like to ask you very serious questions. Do you feel the need to embed a chip into your brain in order to connect with the additional processing power hosted in the cloud?
No, I mean, I'm against that. I'm pretty happy with my brain as it is. I want to keep it the way it is for as long as I can. Um, I think, AI, we have to be careful with AI, but we have to also look at it as a tool to be used and to be, mastered, just as computers are. I'm old enough to tell you that my first two books were written on a typewriter. I took a long time to get used to computers. I liked writing on a typewriter. I loved my electric typewriter, and finally got to computers. And then there was the internet, and we all thought, oh, this is scary. And look at it now. We all use it. We all need it. So I think with AI gives us enormous possibility. But the idea that somehow our brains need to be enhanced, or we need to be enhanced with adding machinery to human beings, I think we need to take away stuff like that. We already have a lot of mechanistic stuff that is affecting us badly. Food, over processed food, over pesticized food. This is killing us. The environment, the fruits of technology have created a very polluted environment. These things are really bad for us, and no amount of computer chips are going to fix the extraordinary complexity of the human body. I'm completely skeptical. I'm very skeptical of any scientist, anybody being able to produce a computer chip that can in any way compete with the extraordinary complexity, the extraordinary genius of the human body, the extraordinary genius of the human immune system. The problem we have is everything we're doing in our lives is getting in the way of that genius. And so instead of adding to it with more crap, we need to take it away and eat good food, breathe good air, relax and be part of a community. And we will all live very, very good lives, connect with our families, work at a decent rate. And all of those good things are conducive to extraordinary health and genius. We have, all of us have great things inside of ourselves, and we just need to unleash them and not try to have other people control it with inferior machinery. We've got the best machine of all.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the scientists are giving up on humanity instead of unleashing, as you said, the remaining 90% of our brain, finding the way through various modalities, which are already known, to unleash the 90%. They are looking for outside help, which is technological help, which will still suppress the 90% processing power of the brain. So that's unfathomable for me. I mean, I just cannot understand why they are not working on the other way than technologically.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Lynne, do you have any new programs this year that would you like to mention?
Thank you. Well, just coming up for people who are, relatively advanced, if they've read my book, The Power of Eight, if they've taken courses of mine, if they consider themselves advanced in intention, I have a really interesting one coming up called Your Intentional Future, kicking off on February 2nd, which is a 5-week live and interactive course where I'm going to be helping people remote view their own future, map their own future with the help of groups, because groups can do it better than you can for yourself. Other people can dream bigger than you can. So it's all about helping people visualize, map, and manifest their ideal rest of their lives. Because most people do intention for a very short period of time. Also, in the later spring, we kick off with my introductory course called Intention Essentials. So that's for people who haven't taken anything from me or don't know a great deal about intention, go through all of the 7 key essentials. And I show you how to do a Power of 8 group, how to use intention in your life for all of the basics. So that's one too, and loads more coming up. The new science I have as a course for people who want to learn more about the new science, and much, much more.
And in fact, you are going to be in Toronto, I think, in September for another conference for consciousness and human evolution. So do you see this, the evolution of the two being done in tandem, or is it going to break away due to some unforeseen factors?
Sorry, I don't. You mean consciousness and human evolution?
Correct.
Oh, well, I think the only way humans can evolve is through a higher state of consciousness. About right now, look at it. We're killing the planet, we're killing ourselves with just the food we eat, the pollution that surrounds us, the chemicals we're using, the medicine we're using in the main, is harming us, is not necessarily healing us, except for emergency situations. That's when conventional medicine is brilliant. But we are, harming ourselves. We need to come to a higher state of consciousness about how we deal with each other in the world, too, how different countries deal with each other. So everything isn't just a land grab for the most powerful, or that we even have to think about who are the big superpowers.
Yes, indeed. Lynne, thank you very much for your time. We are approaching the end of the interview. Any final thoughts?
I just want to tell everybody to be hopeful, because we have this extraordinary power. And I have seen how that magnifies in groups. So I say to everybody, don't play small. Always seek your true power in numbers, particularly the number 8.
Thank you very much. Once again, good luck with all your programs and initiatives, and good luck with the new book you are working on, I assume.
I am working on a new book. I won't talk about it right now. And I'm also working on, I'm working with Gaia. We are producing a new show about all of the intention experiments. And we're also going to hold a huge intention experiment. And we'll be letting everybody know about it when we do that, and inviting everybody around the world to participate. So we are very excited about everything coming up. And for people who want just to start with my work, if you join my website, you get some free tools about doing intention and Power of 8 groups. And you can also access, there are many free tools, a podcast, the 8 Revolution, all of those free downloads, and much, much more. So I try to provide information and access for people with every budget. And of course, every intention experiment is free. Yes. Just all at lynnmctaggart.com.
Lynne, thank you very much for the goodness you bring to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to my guests, thank you for watching. Share it, like it, leave a comment. Visit spiritualinspired.ca. And until next time, love and gratitude.